I know several of you guys know me for a lot of years. If you were going to bet me that I would ever do a DR BCP talk at a conference, let alone a web app conference, I'd have lost $100 because I'd have said, no effing way am I ever going to do a talk like this. But when you go through a snowmagedon, as a lot of us are familiar with in Austin, fortunately for me, I was in Cedar Park, so the hospital grid didn't go out, fortunately. It did, it bounced, but I was in that grid, so I never lost power, and people came to our house to take showers and whatnot. But when I bought this house up in Morgan's Point Resort, does anybody know, except for Todd, because he lives behind me, anybody know where Morgan's Point Resort is? Yeah, you know where Buc-ee's and Temple is? Raise your hand if you do. Everybody does, right? 10 minutes west is Morgan's Point Resort on Lake Belton. So out in the country, and so a tornado hit us. And so I had prepared the house that I bought, gutted it, and prepared it for power because I had asked the previous owners, hey, what'd you do for Snowmageddon? Oh, we had to vacate because we couldn't keep warm. Fireplace wouldn't work, we had no power. It was out for, I think he said 3 days. So I said, okay, I'm gonna design this with the stuff I have, and I'm gonna put it in this house. So never expecting a tornado to hit, but more so a Snowmageddon event or even just a stupid Texas outage, you know, as we're familiar with. Hey, come on now. Fine. Then again, Houston, we have a problem. There we go. Jeez. So what's the goal of the talk? I want to share what I did because we're all geeks, and if we want our power to work when we have some sort of event in Austin, Snowmageddon, we do have hurricanes. Ike did come through years ago. Didn't really impact us much, but if you were above Houston and Louisiana, yeah, you had all kinds of problems. And you know, we need our internet, and we got to do work, right? We work remote, and we got to hack stuff and do whatever we do. In my case, IR. And this does apply to Central Texas. You can see an image of the radar that I was tracking when this was coming. I don't know if Todd was doing this too, but this thing was not supposed to hit us. It swung south, and suddenly, you know, oh, if you're in Morgan's Point Resort, you better take shelter. And suddenly, uh-oh, I got a tornado coming. What's this really going to be like? And of course, this is my own setup and what I did, but there's a lot that applied to what I had in Cedar Park and what I think everybody could do for their own home without, you know, fully going solar, which in our event was probably a bad thing for a lot of homes because I think every home that had solar broke panels. And of course, I've got pie too, so we're going to have pie with this talk. So here's the actual tornado path. Todd and I live right here, and you can see that literally it came over the top of us. I do believe his neighbor got a bounce of the tornado because this house you could not see from the road before the tornado. Afterwards, he lost, what, 70% of his trees? And so he had, I think, the worst damage in our neighborhood where it fell trees, poles, lines, it's mess. You'll see some pictures. And so, yeah, that's the track. It touched down right behind Belton High School. So Belton's down here. This is all Temple. And Morgan's Point Resort is this little blurb. There's no resort. It's just on a lake. Morgan's Point's down by Houston, so I think they had to add resort to it. But I believe right here is Morgan's Point, the actual name of it. And there it is starting to touch down, and then there it is as you're heading towards Crossword Park, towards Temple. So, you know, suddenly at this point, it's already wiped out Todd and I. And then here's some damage to West Adams, so you can see this thing was no slouch. There's a house that wasn't too far from where I lived. Here's actually, yes, while the thing was going on, I had to take pictures. And then, you know, half hour or so, I went and grabbed some of the hail so I could see how big it was. But as you can see out my windows, that's a 12-foot slider. You couldn't see anything. You know, it was nasty. So just sheets of hail and rain, and you can see the sheer quantity. It did sound like a train. So if anybody tells you that. So Wednesday, about 6 o'clock when this thing hit, about 6:20, we were without power from Wednesday 6:20 p.m. until Saturday 6 p.m. when the power started getting turned back on in our neighborhood. But then I had to have my power turned off again, and I'll talk about that. But it did. It knocked over trees and took out power lines and power poles, and transformers exploded, and internet was gone because it broke the line. And when the tornado hit behind Lake Belton on 317, which goes north from Belton to McGregor, where SpaceX does their testing, that main line is what came into our environment, our community, and that's what got taken down. I mean, it just snapped the telephone poles. And so I was, I was prepared. I had built this house for something like, not a tornado, snowmagedon, but something like this. I thought I'm prepared for this. And if anybody tells you it sounds like a train, it does. It really freaked out my wife. I know you guys hunkered down as well. I'm sure Minnie did not like it. I'm sure their little dog was not happy. Junebug could care less. She didn't care. And we were hit with 120 mile an hour straight line winds. So that means these winds are being thrown straight line, straight across. 120 mile an hour is a hurricane, okay? It is fast. This is an F2 that hit us. Unfortunately, like I said, right over the top. It did not touch down until just past our community. We could not see across the yard. Hell, I couldn't even see 10 feet to my oak trees. That's how thick it was. And then the amount of mulch debris, so this is from you mowing the lawn and mowing the oak leaves and mowing the acorns. I had mulch up against my fence. My land slopes like this, and all that leaf debris from mowing and mulching just washed down the yard, and it was just piled up. It took me about 2-3 weeks of shoveling into the trash can every week just to get rid of it. But there's more on that. So first, supplemental solar. I do not have solar on my roof, right? Supplemental solar is something you do partially. Like people will power their sheds or their RV or their vans, and you'll see those on YouTube and whatnot. So I had supplementary solar in Cedar Park. I had 4 360-watt panels on a porch valley in the backyard, just sitting there and screwed down to some 2x4s, connected to my Blue Eddy, just to play with that whole concept. And some of them also connected to my inverter in the garage. So I had moved that out to where I'm at. So supplemental solar is not a whole home. This is pick something to power and supplement, right? I'm still using the grid. I can't put panels on my roof. I have too many oak trees. I face east-west, not south. So south is over here, and my house needs to be this way, not this way. So I was not a good candidate for doing that anyway. And I already had a solar generator with 3,000 watts. And you really need like 12 to 24 to power a house. So you need a lot of solar to power a house, right? If you want to put it on your roof, and that's just daytime solar, batteries is a different scenario, and we'll talk a little bit about that, right? And supplemental solar can reduce some of your utility bill. A good example would be you've got an outbuilding. In my case, I got a big workshop. You'll see that here in a bit. That I fully solar power, no grid to it whatsoever. Encore will screw you if you have 2 buildings. So I can tell you a little bit about that when we get there. And then the other big thing I did it for was to have some capability of having power if something happened. Right? I work from home. My wife works from home. As long as the cables are connected, we should be able to have internet. I can power the router, assuming there's not an outage down the cable path. Cable's pretty dumb, it's just copper. That I should have some internet. And so that was the idea, is to have a place in our home somewhere. We have 2 buildings, we have 2 offices, 1 big roof, carport, and then the house. You could make it your master bedroom, you can make it a guest room, whatever. But a place you could go and keep warm or cool, in our case, cool. And I did add a pair of panels to a solar tracker that I bought when I built this home. 2 of the 4 365s I put on a tracker, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I was prepared. I have some supplemental solar in my office area, separate from the house, right? The house had no solar, but the office ran pretty much all on solar. I have a hybrid mini split in the office area. So this is an improvement I made because there was a wall unit that didn't work when I bought the place. So I took that out and put a window in, and I put a mini split in. But this mini split from EG4 is also solar powered. And so that means I can hook up panels to it, and during the day it will run for free, basically. And so that was cool because I already had 4 200-watt panels, and I just hooked those up to it. And again, reducing use on the grid so I don't have as much power use is really the only goal there, and to make that office space my little fiefdom of emergency. I did have, I got rid of that one, a whole house open frame generator. So everybody's familiar with the generator. Open frame, you'll see a picture later, but it basically means you can see the frame and you can see all the guts inside of it. It looks like a go-kart motor, but it's in a frame. That's an open frame generator. And so I had that, 12,000 watts, and it would power, for the most part, my house. I also have a solar inverter in my workshop, 100% solar. Encore, when the last freeze came in 2024 in January, I have a 220 volt heater, a mobile home heater in that workshop that the person used when whoever owned it before me, he did a lot of woodworking. And so I powered that up to keep that from freezing just because I had it. Well, I spiked a 10K watt limit for Encore. Anything under 10K is $35 a month. Anything over 10K, even if you do it for a day, you get bumped up to $150 a month, and you have to pay that for the entire year. So there's Encore for you. So I had them turn off the grid because I really didn't need it. And so the workshop is 100%. The lights, I just backfed my solar into the panel. And the workshop, the garage open, I can use my small power tools, charge all my batteries. I have lights. I can do everything I need to in my workshop. And then I had 4 15-pound propane tanks. So this is barbecue propane, right? And that's really all it's good for. We'll get to talk about that. And I have a ride-on mower that holds 6.3 gallons of gas. So big-ass opening, easy to siphon. And so I had that. And I've got 3 cars, so I thought, I can siphon gas out of cars. And I have a hand pump to do that. That another lesson learned there. Some of you may already know the answer to why that didn't work. So with our supplemental solar, I've got a Blue Eddy AC300 with 3,000 watts of battery. So it's 2 bricks. You'll see a picture of it here in a minute. And the battery's on the bottom and the controller's on top. I could stack this up to be 12,000 watts, and I can then duplicate that for 24,000 watts, and that would run a house. But I would have to feed a whole lot of solar to it to charge up those batteries, or plug it into the wall and let it charge it up that way is an option. I also have a mini split, 12,000 BTU. So the rule of thumb is there's three models of mini splits, 12, 18, and 24. There's really 2, 12 and 24. You should never buy an 18. The reason is 12,000 BTU is about 400 to 600 square feet, and it runs on 110, which means you can literally plug it into an outlet. An 18 or a 24 BTU is going to require 220, so you have to have a special circuit. So why, if you're running a special circuit, would you not just get a 24,000 BTU for like a great room or something? And then I had the MPP solar inverter that I had in Cedar Park in my garage. That's in my workshop. And so I already had this stuff, and I then expanded it by getting a Duramax 12,000 dual fuel, gasoline and propane generator, thinking, okay, I got the port on there, 50 amp. I can power this house. Everything in the house, 220. I have no gas, no propane. Do you have propane? So you're like me, you're 100% all electric. And everything's electric. Stove, oven, microwave, a water heater, dryer, furnace, air conditioning, right? So 100% reliant on electricity in our place. And then I had the generator port put on. I had what's called a soft starter put on the external unit. If you have or want to use a generator in a house, this is a requirement. You cannot run a outdoor compressor on a generator unless it's a massive generator without one of these soft starters. And the idea is the soft starter will power up the fan first, and then the internal unit, and then the compressor, and feed it only the amount of amps it needs to start, and stagger it so you don't have this huge 50, 60 amp surge, which will kill your generator. So that's required. More about that lesson in a bit. Of course, I had all the cables, and then I had 4 of these guys. I was ready. Yeah, okay. So Wednesday night after the tornado, pulled out the generator, started up in small propane tanks, turned right over. It was awesome. I'm like, this is great. Discovered the size of the generator can't run long in these 15-pound tanks. So 15-pound tanks runs about 15 minutes, just so you know. So yeah, found very quickly that was a fail. So yeah, that was a bummer. Really, again, you're using it for something like power tools if you're working in a field or whatever. I have an acre and a half, but I also have property up in Angel Fire, and that was kind of why I bought that setup, is to take it up to Angel Fire and power tools up that I needed, which I haven't done yet, but that's why I got it. And then I gave up after the second tank, thinking, okay, it wasn't the tank. This is how they work, and then I'm realizing, oh yeah, let's do the math here. And so, of course, no hotels in the area. They got filled up like that. So off to Cedar Park. We went down to Cedar Park where we used to live, and stayed at one of the hotels there. And then I went to Home Depot, and then I got more gas cans, and then I went to Walmart to get some air mattresses because one of mine popped when I was remodeling the house, and yada yada. So I got everything I needed, so I just gave up. So there's the open frame generator, right? Looks like a freaking go-kart engine, open frame. There's all the cables connecting stuff. And again, that is the connector to the house. That's the 50 amp circuit. So I do have extension cords. So if you're a house like mine, you have a lot of 220, you want to get the fridges and freezers running quickly. So I used extension cords for that immediately to get those running and keeping them cool. So I have 2 fridges and a freezer. So I needed to keep that stuff. I would have lost thousands of dollars of frozen and food. So that's what that's for. And then one of those ran to the office. But in reality, if once I got fully powered up, I really only need that. I wouldn't need these, but generators give you that option. So why all the wires? And so yeah, so I gave up. And so let's start here. So what worked? All my solar panels survived except the one used in my workshop. So I had 2 of these just leaning because I hadn't designed what I wanted to do the workshop, because I had just turned off the grid in January, and this happened in May. And so I hadn't quite figured it out. That's a 365 watt panel, and a lot of our neighbors had them look like this on the roof because the hail hit them and just destroyed them. That was the only one I lost, because what it did is it picked it up from where it was leaning and then threw it, and then the hail destroyed it. The other one did not get destroyed, sitting right next to it. It got flipped over, but it was still face up, and so it didn't get destroyed. Can't imagine why it did it, but that's what a lot of our neighbors' panels look like in our neighborhood. So give you an idea. You would think like, oh my gosh, how strong is solar panels? In that setup, when it's lying like that, and not strong. But we'll talk more about that. And so yeah, so I had 1 panel left to charge a workshop, which just isn't enough to charge 3,000 watts of battery. So I was now in a degrading state of battery use. The amount of solar 1 panel can generate would not recharge the battery of the workshop and the batteries charging and me using tools and everything, because I was going through my DeWalt batteries, something fierce, charging them with the blower and all that. And so yeah, I was now in a degrading state, which means I can run an extension cord from my workshop, plug it into the house. And by the way, when you run these inverters, you can't plug them into ground fault circuits. They must be plugged into a non-ground fault circuit, FYI. So you got to be wary of that. So I did once the event was over, charge everything back up that way. But I did run for 4 days without any juice in, other than the 1 panel, which didn't give me a lot. So 3,000 watts for opening the workshop, charging my batteries. Turns out my jump start of the generator, I'll talk about in a minute. And of course, an extension cord to charge up if needed. But when the power came back on is when I ran that extension cord to get the thing working. So what worked? Well, I wish my workshop looked that good. Todd's might. His isn't filled yet. He just built. But I do have that bad boy lawnmower, and there's an inverter. Mine's a little more. You'll see a picture of it. Wiring's not quite as clean. I do need to clean that up. 6.5 gallons of gas is in that, in theory. So again, I had the only working garage door in the neighborhood. Neighbors were asking me, how do you have power? I'm like, remember the tracker? I got solar and I have batteries. And they're like, oh, because people had solar in the neighborhood. Well, once it gets nighttime, nobody had power. But I did, and it's a good thing I did. I do have a Wi-Fi extender out there. I got cameras and all that stuff and alerts when the door opens and all that fun stuff because I have a smart home. And again, that was fun because I got to talk to my neighbors about that. When they were confused and saw that I had lights and nobody else did. But yeah, so fail number 1. Well, my ride-on mower was almost out of gas, so I actually couldn't siphon anything out of it to run the generator. Dope! So yeah, my 5-gallon can, the 1 can I had, was also empty. So I could not start the generator on Wednesday night on gasoline. So I had the 15-pound tanks and no gas. And it turns out, since about the 80s, early 80s, you can no longer siphon gas out of a tank of a car. Because they put a valve in there that when the car rolls over, it shuts off the flow so it doesn't pour out and start fires. If you want to siphon gas, you need an 1/8-inch tube. You got to make a sharp edge on it to get by that spring and ball. And that would take forever to siphon. So I learned that, unfortunately. Before this event, I learned that was not going to work. I shared it with a buddy of mine who thought, I got that big tank in my trucks, maybe I should just put a bypass in there. But yeah, so that was a fail as well. So I have this hand pump for the mower that has no gas. My can had no gas, thus why we went to town, Cedar Park. And then the other thing that I did not know is how much fuel would that generator require to keep your house running? I had no clue. And I really couldn't find an article because, of course, everybody says it depends. And we have a lot of 220, even though the first thing you should do is power everything off and say, what do I really need, right, in order to stretch your use? But it ended up running me 25 gallons a day, and I ran this for 4 days. So I was going to the gas station every day to fill up 3 tanks and had to keep doing that as a scenario. And so, yeah, I did buy 3 more cans, so I now can do 20 at a time. And then, of course, now the mower I try to keep full because I've learned my lesson. So yeah, double face palm on that one. No gas and no gas. And no propane. So what else worked? Now the office area runs about 95% off of the Blue Eddy generator. The only thing I do not have connected is the lights because I don't have it back connected to the panel. So the overhead lights are the only thing that the Blue Eddy does not run in our office. So my wife's computer, monitors, printers, my lab, my monitors for the lab, fans, filters, dehumidifiers, all the stuff that's in the office, calculators and all the stuff she uses, all run on this guy here. I also have a solar tracker with 202 of the 4 that I originally had in Cedar Park on that eco-worthy solar tracker. But yeah, it works great when the sun is shining, but the Blue Eddy has 3,000 watts of battery, so you can drain that at night. And then of course I can use the grid to charge up the Blue Eddy if needed, if it's there. So this worked really well. That's your EG4, so it shows you whether solar's in here or not. And so, yeah, there's cables that on the outside unit, you just run some stuff, you'll see a picture of that. So yeah, if you were saying, what's the number one thing that surprised you? Yeah, that guy right there. The amount of efficiency that mini split, or any mini split, the fact that it's solar as well, that was the only place I could stay cool was in this office space. And the fact that I had the Blue Eddy for power, I have wired, instead of this going to the grid, it's plugged into a box like you would expect it to be, but I also have an extension cord that's wired into it that runs through the same hole in the wall that my solar cables are coming into the Blue Eddy, and I plug it into the Blue Eddy. So at night, this thing is actually drawing power, if needed, off of the Blue Eddy. I'm not using the grid at all, because that was something I discovered when the power was out for 4 days. What good is having it plugged into the grid? So an extension cord cured that problem. But this guy here, everybody should have something like this in their house. Master bedroom, great room, whatever. Because it was 95 degrees with like 95% humidity. It was miserable in our neighborhood that week. It was 4 days for sure. So after spending the night in Cedar Park, got a good night's sleep. Again, our Walmart and Temple was closed. Our Home Depot was closed. So that was another reason going to Cedar Park, is so I can get more gallons, more gas. I got 4 of them now. I got some air mattresses because I have some twin ones, but all the big ones had died over the years. And again, I knew they were without power when they lived there during snowmagedon, so I tried to prepare for it. But now loaded up with gas and all that, I'm ready to try to do something with the house. So now gas in hand, time to get the house powered back up. So I added gas, turned the key, generator wouldn't start. I'm like, what the frick, right? So you're thinking everything you're thinking when it comes to starting up a motor, a gasoline powered motor, right? So I'm scratching my head going, what the hell? So I noticed after a few tries that the battery seemed low. Then I recalled chemistry. So why is it that the generator started on propane but not on gasoline? Same reason your car won't start with a weak battery. You need a strong battery for the spark to vaporize the gasoline to start the engine. You don't need that with propane, it's already in gas form. So fortunately, this is where my solar-powered workshop came to the rescue. So I ran a couple extension cords from the workshop to my battery charger that I keep my 4Runner, my legacy 4Runner, charged up with, and I ran it to the generator, and I literally jump start the generator to get it going. So the batteries that I had in the workshop allowed me to run the battery charger to get the generator started on gasoline. Something I did not expect that now with the new unit I have, there's a plug and you just leave it plugged in all the time, and so any given moment the batteries are charged up. So that was a good one. So poof, started right up when I did that. So I lost about 2 hours. I went on the roof, started blowing leaves off the roof, and it was really, really annoying. And so yeah, the reality is compression starts when you get a spark, and you need a strong spark for gasoline. So that was a painful couple hours of frustration. Fail number 2, clouds and rain prior to the 3 days. In the Blue Eddies, they let you, in most solar generators, they let you set a state of charge low point so that you can use no grid until you get to a certain level, and then it will kick over to the grid and charge it back up. Unfortunately, I had mine set at 20%, and so mine was draining way down, so I think it was like 35 on the day of the event. I forgot to set it back up to 100, knowing that we had thunderstorms coming. I did write Blue Eddy and say, it'd be no-brainer for you to put weather in there and say, inclement weather coming, do you want to change your state of charge to 100%? And you set that to yes, and it should automatically set it for you. I said, this is what happened, and they thanked me for it, and said, well, we'll put in so far nothing in the app, but nonetheless, so yeah. So I couldn't fully utilize on Wednesday night that thing as well. Didn't really matter. Next day, generator and all that. So I tried to use as little as I could in the office. I wasn't there Wednesday, came back Thursday, but again, that mini split I have is solar powered. So when the sun came out on Thursday, it was nice and cool in there. But yeah, here's a drawback: is this stupid adjustable state of charge does not contemplate weather. You have to remember to do that. So yeah, that's one of the things I ran into. And I, of course, went, dang it, really, I forgot to slide that thing over. I was just playing with it this morning, too, because wife just warned me about potential flooding in central Texas tomorrow. So I'm like, oh, slide the bar over to 100%, just in case. So then powering the house up. Now the generator is running, let's see what we can do. So if you can't just like leave everything open. When you put a generator on your house, you've got to turn everything off, especially the grid. So at the top of my panel is the grid. In my case, I couldn't. It would be a huge rewiring. The electrician put the generator circuit on the bottom because that's where he could. He said just the way they put the panel in, it wouldn't work. But normally, you're going to have them next to each other, above and below. And there's these little slider switches that allow you to not turn one on without turning the other off. So you turn the grid off. If you try to turn the power on for the generator, you can't. You got to slide this thing over, and it requires you to turn the power of the grid off to your panel. So I have to do it manually. I got big old stickers on there that says, turn this off before you turn that on and all that. But yeah, you got to turn everything off because, again, start with the 110 stuff. Start with the stuff that is the fridges and all the things you need. Your basic lights, all that stuff. Is the internet even working? It wasn't, but the router was working. The Wi-Fi was working. That only worked for the internal house stuff. And then, once I got that going, I said, well, I gotta see what damage there is to the roof because it destroyed our skylight and, beat the crap out of the roof. Everybody in our neighborhood got new roofs. It was pretty ugly. And get that all cleaned up. Again, no air conditioning in the house. I hadn't done the 220 at this point. I did have a soft starter. We'll talk about that in a second. I spent the night in the office on an air mattress, and I have over-the-air TV, so there's another backup solution. No streaming. So I had over-the-air, and I had a Synology that runs Synology channels DVR, and so I had recorded show and over-the-air, and so I was able to sit there and air-conditioned while everybody else was sweltering or left town. Quite comfortable in that office with that mini split powered by the Bluetti. And so I told her to stay there until Friday until I got the full house powered up. And of course I told her to come home for the next problem. And so there I am kicking back in my office, quite comfy. It was an office chair, but hey, it's still a chair. So 10 a.m. on Friday, time to power up the AC. Let's see what this thing can do. I was kind of like skeptical. Is this thing really going to run? I got this doodad that they say is for what you need it for. And I'll be damned, the air conditioning powered right up and cooled that house down. And I was like, oh, son of a bitch, it works. The generator, you can hear it, right? It definitely bogged down when this thing kicked on, but everything ran. I was like really pleasantly surprised, all because of this thing. So yeah, time to go clean up the branches and start, getting rid of all this crap that was in the yard. I was actually, the day of the event, working on putting a screened-in porch, which I still have not completed because some of that did get damaged from the hail. So yeah, stress level finally starting to go down, So fail number 3. So standard generators, of course, how many people here are like me? TV, computers, printers, everything is running off UPSs. Well, guess what doesn't like open frame generator power? Those guys. I got 6 of those guys, and my house was beeping at me like Armageddon was happening because the dirty power sent the signal to the UPS that says, hey, this is ugly, I'm going into UPS mode. So it on, then off, and it just drained down. I had to unplug all the UPSs, plug them into surge strips, go find enough surge strips, plug everything in so that it would plug directly into the house so I could run stuff. So that was a bummer. And so it turns out my Bluetti also did not like, my Bluetti, if I charged it, plugged it in the wall, the open frame generated dirty power. The Bluetti, through a frequency error, I sent an email to Bluetti. They're like, oh, you're using a generator? Yeah, is it an inverter generator? No, he says, that's why. So yeah, your electronics and fancy stuff don't like open frame generators. So do not buy one, do not use one. If you have one, sell it. Yes?
If you get the more expensive pure sine wave ones, they can usually handle it.
We'll get there. So you need what's known as less than 5% THD, total harmonic distortion, for these things to work, which, as he just pointed out, is a perfect sine wave. You cannot get that in an open frame generator unless you want to buy a $2,000 power conditioner like we have in data centers and the big rack stuff. Well, obviously that's stupid for a home. Or an inverter generator, right? So there's that little guy that I had put on my box and never used. How you know this works, by the way, when you power up when your air conditioning comes on, have you ever noticed how your lights go brrr? That's that amp spike you get from the compressor, the fan, and your internal unit all kicking on at the same time. When I installed this, that went away. I do not have that in my house. That's how I knew it was working. So yeah, I got the dang thing running. The house was cool, 4 o'clock. I'm like, great, wife, come home, spend the night, we're good. Yeah, that thing failed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The capacitor blew in it. Turns out there was a flaw with that unit. So yeah, that was fail number 4. Fortunately, I did have a Rollicool 10,000 BTU stand-up. I used to use it on my screened-in porch in Cedar Park. Just kind of blow it on us while we played cards out in the patio and keep comfortable. So I did have that. So fortunately, I was able to bring that in, put it into a bedroom, and there it is to keep one of the bedrooms cool with the guest room. My wife slept in there while me and the dog slept in the nice mini split cooled workshop with the TV. She did not have TV. I did. So that worked out for me. And so I slept in the office, all comfy, cool, and everything in the house worked. The 110 and everything else worked fine. And I did be able to get the TV up in the living room, so we were watching that because I did cool it off enough that with the Rollicool plugged in, pointing out the window, there's a vent that goes into it in a drain pipe. So I cut a piece of wood so it would go out this window. That window in our living room is the exact same windows that are in our 2 guest rooms. So I was able to, button that up really nice. But we were able to sit there with this thing blowing on us, and it was 80-ish degrees, so it wasn't sweltering. So we're getting back to normal-ish, and then she had a great night's sleep with that thing in the bedroom. So this thing will cool a 10 by 10, 10 by 12 bedroom, no problem, if you're interested in getting something like that as a backup item. But this thing's a pig. When this thing kicked on, the generator noticed. Mini split is 12,000 BTU. This is 10, and it didn't notice. I could not tell when the mini split powered up. The generator did not make any blurb. And it has an app. There's me sleeping in the office. I'm pretty sure, well, she had the bed. She was more comfy than I had to get off the floor. So yeah, day 4, Saturday. So there are the leaves. There are the branches. I know Todd had equally as much. Yeah, I had 82 of these full. And by the way, I had that much more in the yard still to go because I needed to get the leaves off the roof, off the concrete because of the rain and the wetness, the oak and everything would stain the concrete, right? I didn't want to stain. You can see the stain right here, right? I didn't want that everywhere. And I wanted to get it off the St. Augustine so that I wouldn't kill the St. Augustine because you know how it yellows. Plus, I need to get rid of it because this ain't going away by itself. And so I got this dumpster, filled the dumpster with all the remaining items, put another layer of bags on top. He took it, brought it back, and we filled it the rest. It took 2 of these to clean my yard. Now, I'm fortunate. I used a third party. I think I told you guys about this, or Cindy about that. You couldn't get a dumpster from the city. There used to be a service for the city where they bring you a dumpster. Well, everybody in Morgan's Point needed a dumpster. And I got smart and went and got a third-party one and actually got one. I was shocked. But yeah, so we had to clean up the yard. Totaled about 25 cubic yard of debris. That does not include branches. This is leaf debris. All right, this is enough to cover this entire room, probably about this thick. So literally just wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of leaves went into this thing. But yeah, the power finally came back on. The house has AC. Finally spent the night Saturday in my own bed. And then Sunday woke up because it came on late. We really didn't do much. And the house was possessed. My dimmers were all going crazy. My smart switches, GE smart switches on the wall that do the Z-Wave stuff were clicking. I mean, the house was literally doing that. And I'm like, what the hell? So I turned the power all off again, called Encore. They came out. My meter was blown. So yeah, here we go again. Now what? All right, what did it do? What did it break? What did it fry? So I'm starting to stress right back up. So it turns out, I had to turn the power off. So it turns out my house, if you have this condition, be aware, my line comes from the pole to the house, down the wall, into the panel, into my outside panel, right there. Some people have it going, the workshop has it going down the pole, under the ground, up into the workshop. That's the way you want it. Mine, the line shook so much from the wind, if you look carefully here, the color of the aluminum is different on this lug. It's easier to see here than here. What happens when aluminum gets shorted is it actually changes its property and makes it brittle. So the lug actually broke and the big ass aluminum cable in there was shorting, and that's what caused the house to go nuts. So OnCar, they took the meter off, which means I couldn't run it if I tried. But he told me exactly what to do. So another tip for you here is I had to go buy a whole new box, but I couldn't replace the box. Because if you replace the box, you need an inspection and you need a permit. But if you pull this guy off, it's just 2 bolts. You can see one right there, one right here. So you just pull that guy off and then replace it. I had to go to Clean, which is 25 minutes away at the Lowe's, and I'd be damned if I found one, which shocked me because there were a lot of people without power thinking similar scenarios to this. I swapped that out and then greased it up with the grease lube that you got to use, the electrical grease lube. And I called Encore, and the Encore guy that found it, he explained what I needed, what to look for, and I found it. And the dude was awesome. I mean, the only nicest thing I can say about Encore is the dude that serviced my house, because they pissed me off about the $150 a month on the workshop. But yeah, it was awesome. So 2 screws, some grease, and a local Home Depot, I could get it. I was shocked that I found it at Home Depot in Lowe's. It took me 15 minutes, but I had to wait for the guy to come back. Once I got it done at 2 o'clock, he didn't show up to about the contractors came. And the funny part is when they powered up, they're like, okay, you got to stand back. I'm not kidding you. So we're all 3 of us standing in front of this thing like this. And the 2 guys go out, and he says, no, sir, you got to move. And I'm like, why? He says, that sometimes blows off. Because when you turn the power on, that amp spike, if there's a flaw in the meter box, it'll shoot right off your box. And he's like, seriously? He says, 2 or 3 in the neighborhood have done it. We've powered them on. Because again, all that shorting can cause issues within the meter, even though it was a brand new meter. So yeah, that was a bitch. So Sunday evening, finally, power was back on. Roller Cool, again, was running just to try to get the air conditioning a little help. They came out, restored the power. Of course, at 5 o'clock, I'm rolling the generator back out going, here we go again. But nonetheless, I didn't really need it. And so finally, balance to the force had been restored. So yeah, so my disaster setup. My goal was to reduce grid use in part of the house. It was not to power the whole house. My house is not an option for it. I do have enough property. I could put 4 or 5 trackers, but that means I got to run all those lines to the house. I really didn't design the house to have an inverter inside the house and all that, or a Blue Eddy setup or whatnot. And so I didn't care, right? I just wanted something. And then travel with the Blue Eddy in my trailer, so I have AC and DC power. I have a DC freezer. It's a freezer, it's an ice-co. And so it's a freezer or a fridge, and I can travel with it and leave it in my trailer. You'll see a picture of that in a second. And really, it was for snowmagedon. I never thought it was for that dumbass F2. So yeah. So eco-worthy trackers, if you haven't seen one, that's what they look like. 100 square feet, so 10 by 10 by 10. That's how much room you need for this thing to rotate, roughly, with 6 200-watt panels. Oddly, their pictures like this is really not how you should do them. 6 200-watt panels is what you want to do. The width of the panels matter to get 6. Mine on the workshop has 5 because I bought a fatter dual-sided panel, so I only have 1,000 watts out there. But fully loaded, you'll see in a second. But I don't recommend that kind of setup. Mine has 1,100 watts on the front and 1,000 in the back. But yeah, the fact that this thing, again, it's got a little cup wind doodad like you see on all kinds of stuff, it spins. It goes flat when it gets windy. You can set the variable what you want, but I left it default. So when these winds started kicking up, my panels were 6 o'clock, they're like this on the one, and and it goes flat. So when those winds came through, the wind ripped through the panels, not onto the panels or picked up the panels, and the hail kind of came sideways as well, so it was no direct impact. So none of that got damaged. I was blown away that this thing did not have not a single thing wrong with it. And so I'm like, wow, I can't believe this. I figured this thing was toast. I was shocked that it lasted. So you want to ask the second surprise? That's that thing, yeah.
Do those panels have any sort of like industrial ceramic coating on? Like our phones have ceramic coating?
Same kind of glass. Yeah, they will take a decent golf ball size, 1 or below hail hits on direct hail hits. They'll take, as you saw the one panel that got destroyed, but we had huge hail, right? This didn't have a dink, not one, no crack, no nothing. It just blew me away. I'm convinced it's because of this horizontal position it went into. So yeah, these trackers are cheap. You got to make a cement pad. There'll be another funny part about that here in a minute. And so they're only $500. Now, keep in mind, if these 6 panels, if you do the 6 panels, 1,200 watts, 200 watts each, if you put this in at 1,200 watts, it is as efficient as about a dozen panels on top of your roof, because this thing follows the sun all day, right? As opposed to the panels on a roof sit there and the sun has to get optimal for a very short period of time. And so that's why house roofs have so many panels, because it's just not very efficient. The angles just aren't right. These things are stupid efficient. So before I put this in, my Bluetti would take the entire day at 50% to get to 100%. I never let it go below 50. Once I put that in, I slid it down to 20 because it easily. So that tracker that charges my Bluetti will charge it 100% with no use, no basic use on it. My wife's not printing a bunch of stuff and we're not in there, I'm not in the lab. We'll charge it by 1 o'clock, which means I can add another battery. I've got excess solar. That's the optimal. So those things are stupid efficient. When they say 40% efficient, absolutely. That really shocked me. So I got a second one because damn, it survived the tornado. I got a second one, so that's what and the insurance company almost gave me enough to pay for that entire setup, panels and all. I think I paid, the panels are like 150 each. I got 5 of them, and then 350 or whatever for the tracker. And I think the insurance company gave me like $1,200. So, it was like a no-brainer replacement. The one thing they did pay for, just not my roof, I'd assume. So yeah, what worked best? That sucker. That really surprised me. The fact that it survived that kind of wind, and people saying it's a chintzy little thing. No. I've made some improvements. I've recommended it to them. I put Teflon washers in all the pivot points because the metal will rub. That was the only flaw that I really found, and I used more clips instead of using cotter pins. I used clips that make it easier to service and whatnot. So yeah, it surprised me so much about a second one. And so there's the AC300. So that's the control unit on top. That's the battery. You can have 4 of these for 12,000 watts or double that for 24,000 watts. And you can run your whole house. And they sell all the parts to light to plug it into your panel and whatnot. 2 minutes?
10.
Okay, I can do it in 10. Maybe. 15? We can do hallway con for questions. And so yeah, this thing was designed to run, there's the 12 port, there's the 12 watt port, a 12 volt port I use to power the tracker. We'll see that in a second. USBs has wireless charging, so you drop your iPhones on top. These are all 110s. That's a 30 amp circuit, which I do have the cable for. And you can plug it into here, and there's solar as well. But that's the battery. So very cool unit. I really like the Bluetti. I'd recommend definitely look at that over an EcoFlow. Anchor now makes them. But yeah, the Bluetti is capabilities really. There's the hack for the running. That's how I power my tracker. And we'll see that in a second. There's my camera. There's the front cable to the front of the office, cable to the back of the office. That's the mini split plugged into it, running it. And yes, even the iRobot is plugged into that. So there's the mini split EG4 with all the things, right? And so there's cables that plug off, hang off here where you plug it in. Those are the 4 that's what my setup is for this thing. This is my portable setup. This goes into my trailer if I want it to. Right now, that's what's powering this, so it's not optimal. It's just leaning there facing south. But when I move, the solar tracker is going to plug into this for the new owner, and these will go with me for my own personal use. But yeah, this thing is you can do it yourself. I installed this. It was not hard. They're pre-charged. Once you connect it, you release this little thing and it charges the unit. But if you have to take it apart and replace the siding in the house, put it back together, I had to hire somebody to do that because you have to recharge it again. But yeah, this is a do-it-yourself, right? EG4 sold by Signature Solar in Dallas. If you're interested, they sell both the 12 and 24 BTU. But man, this thing is just, as a geek, this thing is too cool. And they tell you need about 7 or 8 of these panels to run it. Nope, 4. Also learned that from the guy in Canada who told me about the extension cord hack. That runs it just fine. Once the sun gets about 11 o'clock till about 3 o'clock, that thing is almost 100% powered on solar. So if I optimize that, it would be like all the time. Like when it goes on the tracker, the new owners are just not going to have a bill except at night. Here's my setup in the garage, in the workshop. So here's my MPP solar setup. This is the switch that allows me to cut off the tracker to the panel. So turn off the solar coming in. That's the backhaul back to the panel. This is a 24 volt fuse box. These are 12 volt drop downs. That's a smart relay, so I can have my yard lights turn on when I want. And then that's a switch that turns that off. I got some hanging cables because I converted to the tracker, and so I still left the old items on there that were doing some lights in the workshop. But now, since I backhauled to the workshop, I didn't need those lights. That's a Pi. We'll talk about that in a sec. And that's a breaker, and that's a breaker. Fuse right there that runs it. But that's the workshop setup. That's your typical off-grid setup. That's a 24 volt. If you need bigger tools, get 48 volt. If you need 220, you need 2 of those, right? You just got to double it, and then double the amount of batteries. I have one smart EG4 LL, which has the screen and everything else, and then dumb ones as a secondary. So this is 3,000 watts as well in a 3 rack. They make 6 racks as well. So I only use 2 of these. So I could add another battery if I wanted to, which I easily could. But yeah, keep in mind, this is 24 volt. Works great for basic stuff. I can run my little DeWalt table saw, portable table saw, and my chop saw, and charge all my tools. There's pretty much nothing in there that I can't use it for. Heat gun. But if you get to the upper level of the amps, you will trip it. That's why you want to get 48 volt, FYI. But great thing. Propane. So I was told you need a minimum of 120 gallons, not pounds. Now we're getting confusing there. Gallons is how much propane's in there. 100-pound tank is actually 25 gallons of propane. So I was told that for a service to come to your house, you need one of these bad boys. I'm like, I don't have any propane at my house. I couldn't use that much propane in 10 years. So yeah, 250 gallon is the smallest you can get. Pretty much they'll bring you a tank. It's that guy right there. And then, of course, the bigger ones that some people have. So yeah, you can run your barbecue, but holy moly, that's a lot of propane. So I bought one of these, the 100-pound, 25-gallon. Generally, now that I know it's 25 gallons a day, I'm thinking I can get 1 day of propane to give me time to go get gasoline, because propane's cleaner. It's easier to, you don't have to worry about refilling it by pouring gasoline on top of a hot generator, that sort of thing. But that's the idea, is to do that. So I bought that thinking, great, now I'm gonna have propane. I can just take it back to the propane place. So I asked the guy, hey, what happened in the tornado? How long did you have propane for? We were out in about 2 days. Well, how long did it take you to get more? About a month. It's like, oh. So I would not have been able to run on propane for the whole time, or I would have had to driven out of town somewhere to get it. I said, well, who else in town had some? Nobody. Everybody ran out in a couple days, because a lot of places run on propane out there in the country. So I'm like, okay, well, I've got 1 day's worth anyway. So it was an improvement. You can get 2 or 3 of these, because again, cleaner, no gas. You don't pour it into the top. And I had to buy all the stupid fittings, because this stupid fitting is different on the generator than one would assume. But these are standard propane items. You just have to connect that. Then I had the hose and all that. So the generator, right? So the Bluetti wouldn't charge in the open frame. The UPSs didn't like it. So, how do you do that? One, a power conditioner like you see in data centers, that big box that does nothing but make perfect sine wave for all the output to your racks. The other is obviously get better conditioning UPSs, like for servers, the big APC suckers, $4 grand or whatever. Nope, I'm not doing that. You can get an inverter generator, which is AC to DC back to AC. And so that is the way to go. So if you want a recommendation, you've got to get an inverter generator. It's about $1,000 more, but trust me, you'll want it if you're gonna get one, because it makes perfect sine wave, not this crap that the open frame cheap generators do. So yeah, most electronics do not like this, but they're fine with this, right? It's just, you're basically creating what the grid's giving you. It can hurt or kill them. I did not lose any, well, I take that back. I did have a couple smart devices I ended up replacing that were hardwired in. So yeah, thus the beeping gate that I have now.
Do you know what the efficiency loss is in doing that dual conversion?
I do not, and I don't care, because that just works. After going through what I went through, no. So yeah, clean power works with everything. I now charge the Bluetti. I can now charge the inverter up. I can do whatever, run the UPSs. It's awesome. So there's the old one. There's my new one. Almost identical, one less 30 amp circuit on here. You get the 50 amp and then a couple 110s. Auto restart. It has a little port right here. You plug it into the wall so the battery stays charged all the time. The old one has it, but they didn't give you the cable wherever it is. They didn't give you the cable. This one came with the cable and a remote key fob start. Same dual fuel, gasoline and propane. So yeah, I've got this one now. It's prettier. It's quieter because it's all contained. But yeah, they also make a 15,000 watt one for $4,500. But this is what you want, or equivalent competitor. Duramax is a well-known generator brand, so. I did like their manuals, and I did like the way the other one works, so I just bought another one. So solar trackers, so shockingly efficient. So there's the one that runs the office, so it now has 3. The bastard child from the workshop is now on here. I had to install some extenders. Not recommended, but it does not exceed the weight of the 6 panels, so I'm okay. But that's what they should look like. That's the one behind. Unfortunately, as you can tell, this is really sunny and everything. But yeah, it turns out I made a faux pas there too, because I installed that in summer after the tornado and didn't take into account that in the fall, that's where it used to be mounted. I'm breaking up that little thing so I can put some more rock. I had to move it out of the shadow line. That guy right there is the power pole that connects to the shed, down to the ground, under the ground. You can see the connection right here. So yeah, I did not take into account that the southern facing trees. So yeah, that was the one. And these are bifacial, which means they reflect front and back. They're lightweight, but I don't see any real gain for bifacial panels unless you put some sort of reflective material down here on the ground. So my hacks, first off, this is the recommended way of powering a Bluetti, or a tracker. Put another panel on, put a battery on, and connect it to the controller box. Say what? No. Really? You know there's cables coming off this thing that are going to whatever it is, in my case, the inverter or the Bluetti. So yeah, don't do that, Do this instead, right? Get your 12 volt whatever, and I've spliced it so I can put one in the wall. So when I move, this will be plugged in. And then in the workshop, I've got the 24 volt, 12 volt stand down, and then that powers that one. You just run another outdoor wire cable to it. You don't need to do that stupid, and that's in their manual. And so I'm on the forums going, this is insane, guys. Why are you doing this? Why do you want another battery and another panel? No. So yeah, that's how I got mine set up. And that's a relay so for the smart stuff. So yeah, you gotta have Pi. No, not that Pi. Yeah, that Pi. So I do have this thing called a Raspberry Pi running Solar Assistant. I also did have to hack that cable together to match the pins for the EG4 batteries. And so that thing gives me all the stats that I need, right? We're geeks, we wanna know what's going on with the power. So that thing gives me this grid, so I now know what the battery level is, what the PV in, what the load is. Nice graphs, lets me schedule when I wanna use grid, if I was using grid. The mini split has this software, and then the Bluetti software right here gives me that kind of thing, so you can set it up. I also hack this by the fact that we want status. I alert on how much solar is coming in, so I know I'm getting solar, so I know if there's a drop off. It also emails me. So there's a MQTT in these devices that you can enable, and you can use it with Home Assistant, or in my case, Hubitat. I enabled the driver on my Hubitat, put that in there so that I can get these MQTT messages into Hubitat. I then have a Gmail connector, which then sends me email and pushover, which sends me I've hit 700 or 800, or when my batteries get to 100%. So I now know, and since they're all in Gmail, I can kind of track. So last fall is when I started seeing this degrading performance on my workshop, and I'm like, why? And I went, oh, shadows, I'm a dumbass. And so that's what that did. That information told me is hey, you need to put it more sunny. And that's what my emails look like, right? So you can see, and of course the time and date will be there. So you can see what it is, and there's my state of charge. Your battery's at 100%. Is it 100% at 1 o'clock or 100% at 4 o'clock? Why does that matter? If it's 100% at 1 o'clock, I could add more batteries because I got excess solar. This is why you want to do this. The other thing is my solar trailer. Yes, I have a solar trailer. So the Bluetti goes inside this. I have it hooked up with an RV type connector. I've got 4 100 watt panels. The Bluetti sits in this, and as I'm traveling down the road with the Bluetti and my ice cold fridge in there, and lights in there, and whatever else I want, this thing will be self-contained. Now when I go to the hotels, I don't have to pull the cooler out and haul it into the hotel. I just leave it in there. I've got motorcycle alarms on both the doors, the trap doors on here, so I can set the alarm and lock it. I've got locks. These are not the locks. Don't use these for locking. And these pop off with kick release screws, same kind of screws you see here underneath, so I can take these on and off if needed. But yeah, I now have a solar powered trailer that I can take with me on trips and power my DC fridge, tools, whatever I might need when I finally get working on my property in Angel Fire. So yeah, soft starter, again, I got this thing. By the way, if you ever go down this route and play with a soft starter, replace your capacitor. This is that service your AC guy always does and charges you $200, $300 for. The part's $17, man. You got a screwdriver, you short it so the capacitor goes out, you replace it. So when this failed, I figured this got fried and I replaced it just because. This is a more well-known unit, a little more expensive than that guy. I put it inside this box just because I didn't want that just sitting there getting sun on there, because this is the eastern side. But yeah, these things, even if you don't have a generator, I would highly recommend it. Consider another mini split in your house somewhere. Solarize it, even if you don't use it. You can always run cables to a driveway and just set up on PVC or whatever and have a backup mechanism, because, you know, Todd will attest, it was hot, it was humid, it was miserable, you're stressed, you're not a happy camper, or reverse that for snowmagedon, you're cold, you're freezing. You know, this thing, you know, awesome. And of course, I had to write a playbook. I had to remember the next time how to do it. And I had to make it so my daughter and her boyfriend, or now fiance, soon to be husband, could potentially do it when we're in New Mexico. So I had to write how to connect it, where to find it, what it looks like, put this cable here, because I literally like, God damn, there's a lot of steps to this when I actually had to do it in an emergency, like forget to charge the battery, for example. Or is there enough gas? Check the gas before you start this. So yeah. Hallway con, we can talk about more of it, any ideas, whatever, but that's what I went through. It was a bitch. I learned and I'm sharing, and you know, it was an interesting experience. That's all I can say. Thank you.